Part 1, the day she left us. The day Willow walked out on us was the day everything changed, not just in my life, but in Anna's too, though she was only 5 and barely understood what was happening. Yet I remember the way she clung to my leg, watching Willow walk out the door with nothing but a cold glance back, no goodbye, no kiss, no regret in her eyes as she climbed into Ethan's car and drove off, laughing like the last 10 years with me had been some temporary game she was glad to be done with. And I stood there frozen, not for myself, but for Anna, because I knew in that moment that this little girl deserved so much more than the mother who chose luxury over love, lust over loyalty. And it tore me apart, knowing I had to explain to her that her mom wasn't coming back. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. And for months after that, Anna would ask if we could go visit mommy or if mommy would come to her school play or draw her a birthday card. And every time I'd smile through the stab in my heart, pick her up, kiss her forehead, and say, "Mommy's busy right now, baby, but I'm here." And she'd hug me so tight I thought her tiny arms could hold the world together. And maybe they did. Because as the days turned into months and the months into years, it was her laughter, her questions, her stubborn little tantrums and bedtime cuddles that stitched the hole Willow left in my soul. And I built a life for us. A small one. Nothing fancy. Just a 2-bedroom apartment above a bookstore where I worked part-time. And I'd help Anna with her homework on the floor of the back room, surrounded by piles of forgotten paperbacks and the smell of old stories. And though we didn't have much, we had each other, and that was enough. For a while, at least. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss love, didn't miss having someone to talk to at night, to share my dreams with, to hold when the silence in the house became too loud. But I couldn't risk letting someone in again. Not after what Willow did. Not when I had Anna to protect. Not when every woman I met seemed to either pity me or secretly wonder what I did to make my wife leave. And maybe that was the hardest part. Not the loneliness, but the quiet judgment. The whispers from other parents at school functions, the way teachers always asked about Anna's home situation. Like, I wasn't doing enough. Like a father's love couldn't be enough. And yet I showed up every single day, packed her lunches, did her hair as best as I could, read her bedtime stories, attended every recital, and clapped louder than anyone else in the room. Because if there was one thing I knew how to do, it was to love my daughter with everything I had left. And then one night, as I was folding laundry and Anna was asleep with her arm wrapped around her favorite stuffed lion, there was a knock at the door, a soft, hesitant knock that made my chest tighten. And when I opened it, there she was, Willow, older, thinner, tired looking, but still the woman who once had my whole heart. And before I could speak, Anna ran to the door, saw her, and froze. For a second, I saw hope flash in her eyes, but it vanished when Willow knelt down and said, "Hi, Anna. Do you remember me?" And I swear, I've never been prouder than when my daughter looked her mother dead in the eye and said, "You left us," before turning around and walking back into the apartment, leaving Willow stunned and me speechless, because I realized then Anna didn't need closure, didn't need an apology. She just needed to know who was there for her. And that night, after I closed the door on Willow without saying another word, I lay next to my daughter, held her close, and whispered, "I'll never leave you." And she whispered back, "I know, Daddy." And in that moment, I knew that whatever pain Willow had caused us, it no longer had power here, because love had won. After that night, when Willow showed up unannounced and Anna shut the door on her with more strength than I ever thought a 10-year-old could have, something changed in both of us. Not just the silent understanding that we didn't need her anymore, but a deeper kind of peace, a final breath of closure that allowed us to stop looking over our shoulders and start looking ahead. And though I expected tears or confusion from Anna afterward, what I got instead was resilience. She never brought up her mother again, not even in passing. And I realized that maybe I had been carrying her pain longer than she had, projecting my fear of abandonment onto her, when in truth, she had already decided who her real parent was, who stayed, who loved, who mattered. And once I truly believed that, something softened in me too, like my heart had been clenched into a fist for so long and finally let go. And with that softening came a kind of lightness I hadn't felt in years, like maybe life wasn't just about surviving pain, but finding joy despite it. And so I started changing things, not big changes, but the kind that told the world we were more than what we'd lost. I painted Anna's room in her favorite shade of blue, signed her up for art classes on weekends, and bought a secondhand piano for her to experiment with, because she said she liked the sound of sadness in the notes. And I wanted her to understand that sadness could also be beautiful. And I took care of myself too. I started running in the mornings, making real meals instead of frozen ones, and even began reading again, not just to Anna, but for myself, rediscovering stories that made me feel something deeper than obligation. And then one rainy Saturday afternoon, when Anna was at a friend's house, I wandered into a new little coffee shop that had opened across from the bookstore, not expecting anything more than caffeine and silence. But that's when I saw her, Sophia, standing behind the counter with a flour-dusted apron, humming softly as she arranged pastries in the display. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I didn't just see a woman serving coffee. I saw warmth, sunlight, softness, and something in my chest stirred like an old record player whirring back to life. And when she looked up and smiled, really smiled like she saw me, not the invisible single dad, but the man, I felt like the world had tilted slightly on its axis, and I found myself walking to the counter and ordering something I didn't even want just to hear her speak. And she did, with a voice like late night jazz and the easy kind of laughter that made you want to stay in the room longer than you should. And when she asked what I did, I told her I worked in the bookstore across the street and was raising my daughter. And instead of pity, she said, "That's beautiful," like it wasn't a burden, but a badge of honor. And I left that shop with a warmth in my chest I hadn't felt in years. And I came back the next day, and the next, and pretty soon it became routine. Sophia would slide me a coffee before I asked. I'd bring her a forgotten book from the store, and we'd talk, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for an hour. And I found myself laughing more, standing straighter, waking up with a kind of hope I hadn't dared to entertain in a long time. And after a few weeks, I introduced her to Anna, cautiously, because I didn't want anyone getting too close if they couldn't handle the complexity of our little world. But Sophia didn't flinch when Anna asked blunt questions or tested her with sarcasm. No, she answered her with grace, patience, and even matched her wit. And by the end of the afternoon, my daughter was showing her how to play a song on the piano. And I stood in the doorway watching them like I was witnessing a dream I didn't know I was allowed to have. And over time, Sophia became more than just a smile behind the counter. She became the quiet comfort at the end of my long days, the person who listened without judgment, who celebrated every small win like it was a parade. And Anna started leaving little notes for her, like "thanks for the lemon cookies" or "your coffee is better than dad's." And I saw it then, how naturally she fit into our life, not as a replacement, but as something new, something gentle and steady. And one evening, as we walked home from the bookstore and the streetlights flickered on one by one, Anna looked up at me and said, "You seem happier lately." And when I asked why she thought that, she shrugged and said, "Maybe because you're finally being loved back." And it hit me so hard I had to stop walking for a second because she was right. Sophia wasn't just someone I liked. She was someone who made me feel seen, respected, cared for. And when I kissed her for the first time under the awning of her coffee shop while rain poured around us, it didn't feel like the start of something reckless or impulsive. It felt like coming home. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that maybe, just maybe, love wasn't a trap or a lie. It was a second chance. And this time, I was ready to take it. The strange thing about healing is that it doesn't announce itself with fanfare or flashing lights. It just slips in quietly during the small moments, like the way Sophia started leaving a second mug next to the coffee pot at the bookstore before I even asked, or how Anna no longer flinched when she heard the word mother in conversation. And as the months rolled by and our little trio found its rhythm, I realized that what we were building wasn't some rebound fairy tale or temporary patch over old wounds. It was a new kind of family, one stitched together by shared breakfasts, late night laughter, and quiet forgiveness. Sophia never tried to replace Willow or erase the past. She simply walked beside us, letting Anna lead the pace, offering kindness without expectations and love without pressure. And that's what made all the difference. Because the more she showed up, the more I saw Anna's walls slowly come down, brick by brick, until one day she looked up from her sketch pad and asked Sophia if she wanted to come to her school play, not as a guest, but as family. And I swear I saw tears in Sophia's eyes before she blinked them away and said yes, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And that night, when Anna took the stage and scanned the crowd, her eyes stopped on us, me and Sophia side by side in the front row, and her smile widened in a way I hadn't seen since she was a toddler. And I realized she wasn't performing just for me anymore. She was performing for the family she had chosen, the one we had built from ashes and second chances. And things kept growing, not just emotionally, but practically. We started spending weekends together at the farmer's market or watching old movies with popcorn and messy blankets, and Sophia taught us how to cook real meals that didn't come from a microwave, while Anna pretended to hate it but secretly loved every second, especially the messy parts when flour ended up in someone's hair. And the bookstore became a little sanctuary for all three of us, with Sophia reading to kids during story time and Anna organizing shelves alphabetically because chaos gives me anxiety, Dad. And I just smile because I finally had something to smile about, something solid, something. And even the regulars started noticing, asking if Sophia was my wife, to which she'd just grin and say, "Not yet." And I'd feel my heart skip because I knew deep down that was exactly where we were heading. But life, of course, never stays calm for long, and one sunny afternoon, while we were having a picnic in the park, and Anna was chasing ducks with a kind of pure joy only kids can manage, I heard a voice I hadn't expected to hear again. sharp, familiar, and dripping with forced concern. George? And when I turned around, there she was. Willow, dressed in expensive activewear and sunglasses that probably cost more than our rent, standing a few feet away with Ethan hovering awkwardly behind her. And for a moment, it felt like time folded in on itself, all the old hurt rushing up like a tidal wave. But then I looked at Sophia, calm and unbothered, and at Annah running through the grass without a care in the world. And I knew I was no longer the man Willow had broken, no longer the abandoned husband desperately trying to glue a family back together. I was a father, a partner, and a survivor. And I straightened my back and said, "What do you want?" And Willow gave this half-hearted smile and said, "Just thought we could catch up. Maybe talk about Annah." And I nearly laughed because after all these years, after everything she had done, she thought she could just show up and be part of the story again like no time had passed. But before I could say anything, Anna ran up with grass stains on her knees and the wind in her hair, stopped when she saw her mother, and without missing a beat said, "Oh, it's you." Not cruelly, just plainly, like she was talking about a neighbor she didn't care to greet. And Willow knelt down and opened her arms like some scene from a drama, saying, "Come give mommy a hug." But Anna didn't move. She just turned to Sophia, grabbed her hand, and said, "I don't want to." And that one moment shattered whatever fantasy Willow had built in her mind about returning to reclaim a family she abandoned. And when she stood up, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not anger, not sadness, but regret, the kind that comes too late to matter. And she said, "I made mistakes." And I nodded, replying, "And we moved on," before taking Sophia's hand in mine and walking away. Not because I wanted to hurt Willow, but because I finally understood the difference between forgiveness and access. You can forgive someone without letting them back into your life. And in that moment, I felt Anna squeeze my hand tighter. And when I glanced down, she was smiling, really smiling, like a weight had finally been lifted from her, too. And that night, as we curled up on the couch, Sophia resting her head on my shoulder, and Anna drawing cartoons of ducks that looked suspiciously like Ethan, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not relief, not survival, but joy, pure, unfiltered joy, the kind that fills every crack without trying to fix anything. And I knew then that whatever life threw at us next, we'd be ready. Not because we were perfect, but because we were together. And sometimes that's all you need to turn a broken past into a beautiful future. It's strange how the idea of proposing to someone feels so different the second time around. Not rushed, not driven by the pressure to settle down or prove something, but calm, patient, certain. Like a quiet heartbeat that had been steadily growing louder every time Sophia smiled at Anna, every time she stayed late to help clean the bookstore, every time she kissed me like I was more than my past. And I think I knew long before I admitted it to myself that she was the one I wanted beside me for the rest of my life. Not because I needed her to fix what was broken, but because she made everything feel fuller, more complete. And yet, as ready as I felt inside, I still paced the living room for hours one night, turning the little velvet box over in my hands like it held the universe, asking myself if it was the right time, if Anna was truly okay with everything, if Sophia saw the same future I saw every time I pictured a house filled with piano music and laughter and Sunday pancakes. And as if she heard my thoughts, Anna walked in wearing her ridiculous fuzzy socks, flopped onto the couch beside me, and said, "You're acting weird. Are you dying?" And when I laughed and told her no, she raised an eyebrow and said, "Is it about Sophia?" And that's when I showed her the ring, holding it out like a fragile truth. And I waited for a reaction, but instead of the dramatic gasp I expected, she just looked at it, nodded, and said, "Good. I was worried you were going to wait too long and someone cooler would steal her." And my jaw dropped as she leaned her head against my arm and whispered, "She makes us better, Dad. I like her." And just like that, every doubt dissolved because my daughter, the girl I raised through every storm, was giving me her blessing, and I wasn't going to waste another second. So I planned it all carefully, quietly, involving the bookstore team and even the coffee shop staff for a surprise proposal that would feel personal and cozy. Just us, just our world. And on the night it happened, I told Sophia we were doing a small bookstore event, just a local poetry reading, and she wore her favorite floral dress, the one that made her look like spring itself. And as she stepped through the door, the lights dimmed and fairy lights sparkled above the shelves. And there in the center of the store stood Anna holding a book with a handmade cover titled, "Why Sophia Belongs with Us Forever." And she read from it, her voice shaking, nervous, but full of heart, listing all the reasons she loved Sophia. Because she makes Dad laugh when he thinks no one's watching. Because she always remembers I hate mushrooms. Because she doesn't try to be my mom, just my friend. And because she makes our house feel like a home. And by the time she finished, tears were already falling down Sophia's cheeks, and I stepped forward, taking her hands, falling to one knee with a ring that suddenly didn't feel heavy at all, but light, like a promise already halfway kept. And I said, "I don't need a perfect life. I just need this, you, Anna, and the love we've built together." Will you marry me? And her yes was barely a whisper, but echoed through my chest like thunder. And the applause from our small circle of friends and bookstore staff felt like the whole world cheering, and we held each other in the quiet after, surrounded by books and lights and the smell of old pages and new beginnings. And I thought, this is it. This is what peace feels like. The weeks that followed were a flurry of soft planning and endless joy, not flashy or extravagant, but intimate and thoughtful. Anna helping Sophia pick a dress, the three of us trying cake samples and ending up with chocolate frosting on our noses. And even though Willow reached out again when she heard the news, asking if she'd be invited to the wedding, I politely told her no, not out of anger, but because some doors once closed should stay that way. And this wedding was about the family we had now, not the one that left us behind. And Anna, growing into this wise beyond her years teenager, never questioned it. She just threw herself into making handmade place cards and a playlist of songs that made her feel safe and happy. And as I watched her and Sophia decorate the backyard of our little home with wildflowers and fairy lights, I realized I wasn't just marrying Sophia. I was marrying a new chapter, a new life that honored the past without being trapped by it. And when the day finally came, and I stood under that homemade archway with Anna holding my hand, watching Sophia walk toward us with sunlight dancing in her hair, I didn't think about the pain or the heartbreak or the years I spent wondering if I was enough. I thought about how far we'd come, how much we had built from scratch, and when we exchanged vows, mine weren't fancy or poetic, I just said, "You found us in the dark and became our light. I promise to love you the way you love us, quietly, fiercely, forever." And Sophia whispered back, "I don't just love you, I belong with you." And in that moment, I knew this wasn't a happy ending. It was the beginning of the life we'd always deserved. They say home is where the heart is, but for me, home wasn't a place. It was a feeling that bloomed over time in quiet moments, in Sophia's soft humming in the kitchen on Sunday mornings, in the way Anna's laughter echoed through the house like music, in the shared silences that didn't feel empty but full of peace. And now, months after our wedding, I realized I wasn't just content. I was whole in a way I didn't even know I could be. And while our lives weren't without their bumps, Anna still had nightmares sometimes, and Sophia still doubted herself on the hard days. We had built a life where no one had to face anything alone ever again, and that made all the difference. The house, once cold and silent, had transformed into a place of light. Walls filled with art, books, Polaroids, and silly post it notes like, "Don't forget to smile today," or "You're stronger than your doubts." And I caught myself grinning every time I read one, not because the words were new, but because the love behind them never got old. And one rainy afternoon, while we were all curled up on the couch under mismatched blankets watching some cheesy rom com, Anna swore she hated but secretly loved. She suddenly turned to me and asked, "Do you think she ever regrets it?" And though I knew who she meant, I didn't rush to answer. I just looked her in the eyes and said, "Maybe, but regret won't change who stayed." And she didn't say anything back, just leaned her head on my shoulder like she used to when she was little. And Sophia reached over and held her hand, and the three of us sat there like a living sculpture of healing, a reminder that love doesn't erase pain, it transforms it. And that spring, something beautiful happened. Sophia found out she was pregnant, and when she told me, I didn't cry, not at first. I just sat in stunned silence, staring at her radiant face until the weight of the moment hit me all at once, and I pulled her into my arms and whispered, "Thank you for choosing us." And she smiled through her tears and said, "You were never the backup plan, you were the only plan." And we told Anna that night over dinner, expecting shock or panic. But instead, she just blinked, then smiled and said, "Guess I better start acting like a big sister now." And I saw the pride in her eyes, the way she straightened her back like she was ready for this next chapter too. And the months flew by. Every milestone felt like magic. Hearing the heartbeat, picking nursery colors, Anna reading bedtime stories to the belly like she was already bonded with the little one. And I couldn't help but marvel at the life we were shaping. One where love wasn't just spoken but lived in every action, every sacrifice, every gentle touch. The day our son was born, the world seemed to hold its breath. Sophia was a warrior, calm and fierce, and when I first held him, wrapped in a soft blue blanket with eyes that mirrored mine, I whispered, "Welcome home." And he looked up at me like he already knew who I was, and I broke down. Not from not from fear, not from overwhelm, but from sheer overwhelming joy, because this was the family I never thought I'd have, the one that came after the storm, the one I fought to deserve. We named him Oliver, and he fit into our lives like he'd always been there, like he'd been waiting for the right moment to join the story. And Anna was the best big sister, overprotective, dramatic, and endlessly loving. And seeing her cradle him in her arms, whispering promises to protect him forever, made me realize just how much she had grown, how far she had come from the girl who once asked why her mother didn't love her enough to stay. Now, she didn't ask that question anymore, because she knew love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect parents. It was about presence, effort, and choosing each other every single day. Our nights became a rhythm of lullabies, diaper changes, and late night giggles. And while we were often exhausted, we were never unhappy. Because even the hard moments were colored with the quiet knowledge that this was what we had built together. This was the reward for enduring. And one evening, as I stood by the window, rocking Oliver to sleep while Sophia and Anna laughed in the kitchen over burnt cookies, uh, I realized I wasn't haunted anymore. I wasn't carrying the weight of betrayal or abandonment or resentment. I was just a man, deeply in love with his life, grateful beyond measure for a second chance. And years passed that way, quietly, beautifully, with birthdays in the backyard, handmade cards from the kids, road trips full of bad singing and better memories. And every now and then, when I found myself alone at the bookstore or on the porch with a cup of coffee, I'd think about the man I used to be, the broken father, the heartbroken husband, and I'd whisper a quiet thank you to the universe for the pain, because without it, I wouldn't have found my true home, my real family, the love that wasn't born of fantasy, but of truth, effort, and time. And one evening, long after the kids were asleep and the house was quiet, Sophia curled up beside me and said, "You're awfully quiet. What's going on in that head of yours?" And I turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and said, "Just thinking about how lucky I am." And she chuckled. "You always say that." And I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Because it's always true." And in that moment, under the soft hum of our home, with the woman I adored in my arms and the laughter of our children lingering like music in the walls, I knew this was it. This was forever. Not the one I once hoped for with someone who left, but the one I fought for, earned, and cherished with someone who stayed, who loved not only me, but every broken piece I carried. And together we turned those pieces into something unbreakable. And that, more than anything, was the story I wanted to live for the rest of my life.